You referred there to justice and the rule of law. At that time, did you think justice and the rule of law would bring you to the International Criminal Court in The Hague?
No, I definitely did not. Because everything that we did at that time was to first and foremost assist those who had been victimized. Secondly was when, as a result of the growing anger amongst supporters of the PNU, we went out to calm them and to prevent them from doing anything that is retaliatory in nature, and actually appeal to them to allow the government and to allow proper procedure to get justice for them, which we were assuring them would eventually happen. Little did I know that that would mean myself being brought to the International Criminal Court.
Did you have a plan with Ambassador Muthara and General Ali that was conceived to bring retaliatory and revenge attacks on people in Naivasha and Nakuru?
No, Your Honors, I never had any such plan. We never met, we never discussed it, we never conferred on it, we never had any meeting at all, being the three of us, least of all to discuss anything to do with retaliation or revenge attacks on anybody.
Thank you very much. Wait there, please.
You finished, Mr. Kay? Thank you very much. Mr. Kenyatta, are you at ease? Do you think you can proceed immediately with the questioning on behalf of the Office of the Prosecutor?
That will be fine, Madam President.
Yes, there is 1 hour more till the break, which is exactly the time allocated to the team of the prosecutor. Mr. Prosecutor, the floor is over to you.
Your Honor. Mr. Kenyatta, your defense in his argument, his opening, mentioned that the consideration is Mr. Odinga was responsible for the crimes in the post-electoral violence. I'd like to take this opportunity, if you can explain to us if you consider is politically responsible or also criminal responsible, in the sense that Mr. Odinga provide weapons or to order to commit crimes.
Your Honors, I will not say that he was criminally responsible because I have no evidence of him supplying arms. But Your Honor, I will say that indeed he has political responsibility, because had he gone out much earlier and first and foremost not had some of the inflammatory remarks that were being made at various press conferences that I had mentioned earlier, claiming that rigging was taking place, had he agreed to follow proper due process and gone to court as opposed to calling for mass action during the time, the violence would not have occurred. And lastly, Your Honor, had he, when the violence broke out in various parts of the country, used his own political voice to go to his supporters and to tell them to stop the violence, I don't believe the violence would have reached the level and the magnitude of over 600,000 Kenyans being displaced. So, politically, yes, I would say he was involved. Criminally, Madam President, I have no evidence of him organizing weapons.
Thank you. Do you feel do you know who were the Pentagon in the ODM?
Yes.
Can you mention them?
The Pentagon, I think, was headed by the Honorable Raila Odinga. There was also Mr. Nyaga was one member. Mr. Balala, I believe, was another member. I believe Charity Ngilu was a member. I believe the Honorable Ruto was a member.
Were they opposing to Mr. Odinga incitation to violence or not?
Madam President, I did not hear that question. I didn't
The question is, if I understand your difference between political responsibility and criminal responsibility of Mr. Odinga, the question now is going to the second level. These other political leaders of the ON are similar to Mr. Odinga or are different?
Well, at the end of the day, I won't call them similar or different. I believe that he who bears responsibility is he who is the leader, and the leader was Raila Odinga. He was the leader. He is the one who could have given direction or said to the others, because he was ultimately the party leader, the flag bearer.
Thank you. So he was a political leader, you say, but do you know if the other members of the M leadership were involved themselves in planning attacks, in providing weapons, including Mr. Ruto?
Madam President, I have no evidence once again of any planning activities. What I do know is that some of the strong words that were being used during the campaign period, some of the issues that were being raised when the ballots were being counted and just before with regard to rigging, all these contributed towards raising tensions and temperatures, which ultimately, I believe, were the cause of the violence that we witnessed and the displacement that we saw.
In your answer to your defense, you say you were not aware of a plot to rig elections. Can you be more specific? Do you know now if there was a plot to rig the elections?
Madam President, I said I was not aware of any plot to rig the elections of 2007 by President Kibaki. And furthermore, since then, a commission of inquiry was put together under the able leadership, and it was an international commission under the able leadership of Justice Kriegler from South Africa. And that commission, which is the only report I can go by, clearly indicated that whereas there may have been some irregularities on both sides, there was definitely no evidence of any rigging, especially at the National Tallying Center where I was at KICC. That is what I can go by.
Thank you. You say that to stop retaliation, you were talking about the need to go to court. And similar comment you did publicly after the elections were announced in advising the ODM to go to court. Do you think the court in Kenya can do justice in these cases?
I believe so. It is not the first time that we had contested elections. We had contested elections in 1992, where the losers who felt aggrieved went to court. We had a similar situation in 1997, where the losers again went to court. And I believed that the first call of justice for one who believes in the rule of law should be the courts. And thereafter, if you feel you are still aggrieved, there are still many other avenues that are open to you without necessarily resorting to violence or destruction.
Yes. Do you think in Kenya there are many people who perceive the court will be ineffective against political leaders?
Yes, there is a perception that the courts may be perceived as being ineffective, but that is one of the main reasons also why the fact that the courts themselves require reform or review, I don't believe is justification, Madam President, to resort to violent means. Ultimately, violence does not help any particular situation, whether you're aggrieved or not. So ultimately, that is why we said, if it's not the courts, let us also engage in dialogue to find how we can actually find a way forward.
I agree with the comment on the need to go to the court. The problem is how you persuade people to go to court when the people perceive the court will be ineffective against leaders. So how you did it? How you persuade them?
Your Honors, for me it is not a question of persuading the people. It is a question of the leaders themselves accepting that we need to live in peace, accepting that certain decisions can have major consequences on lives, can have major consequences on property, and consequently not to take any action and to appeal to your supporters not to take any action that may be seen or may result in the loss of life, or that may result in the loss of property. So ultimately, it was the onus, and I still maintain that particular position, it is still the onus of the leaders to appeal to their members to accept that position. I do remember in 1992, where again in a very, very tight election between President Moi and Kenneth Matiba, it was a very close election. Again, I think in due respect of what a call by him would have resulted in at the time, he chose the path fully well knowing that maybe he may not get the justice through court, but at the end of the day, life is much more important than whatever position you are seeking to fill.
Can you describe to the court when this position to try to reach a common agreement between the PNU and the ODM started and how it was triggered?
Madam President, what I know is that soon after the general election results, especially the presidential elections were announced, we who were affiliated with President Kibaki, like I said, I was a member of KANU. I had about 18, 20 members of parliament who were elected with me at the same time on a KANU ticket. There were PNU members, there were NAC Kenya members, there were Ford Kenya members. We immediately began trying to form a coalition, first and foremost of the supporters of President Kibaki, to be able to go to Parliament. It was at that time that ODM Kenya, who also had a presidential candidate, also joined President Kibaki's team. And it was at that stage, once we had consolidated also on our side, I think there were already ongoing discussions in government. I was not a member of government at that time, trying to reach out. We ourselves as political leaders held a number of press conferences where again we appealed to the ODM that let us have dialogue. If you feel there might not be justice, let's have dialogue amongst ourselves. I remember clearly myself in one particular interview, Madam President, me calling and saying, well, let us look at it from a different perspective. President Kibaki has won the presidency. ODM clearly has a majority in parliament. It therefore means that one way or another, President Kibaki cannot rule without having the support of parliament. It is a perfect opportunity for dialogue. And that we started very early in January.
All this effort with the parliament, you were not connected with the leader of the PNU or the top leader of the government?
Madam President, I didn't understand that question. I didn't quite hear it.
If these efforts, these negotiations you were just involved with parliamentarians, or were you also discussing this idea with members of the government or the PNU?